Good morning. Good morning. How's everybody doing? I'm Nancy Allen. I'm Executive Director of IFB, and I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the board and staff. Our President and Chair, Scott Finley, couldn't make it out to this event today, and he asked me to send along his regrets. But we are joined today by our Vice Chair, Sheldon Steer from Winnipeg, Treasurer Glenn Freeland from Strathmore, Alberta, and also our board members MJ Comtois from Quebec and Elizabeth McDonald from Peterborough. This year marks the 29th anniversary of the IFB Summit. The first summit was held in September 1990 at the Skyline Triumph Hotel. But over the years, the summits and IFB have evolved with our evolving financial services industry, but the core idea has remained the same: to bring together independent advisors to share ideas, make connections, and enhance professionalism. In 2018, we sent out a comprehensive survey to past summit attendees, and some of you may have received that survey and responded to it. And we really spent a lot of time going over your responses because we wanted to know what we could do better and what things were working well for you. Your responses are reflected at this event today. For one, you told us that you'd be more comfortable sitting at tables rather than rows of chairs. And many of you said you'd like a program that featured all keynote speakers. This is actually a format that we've been doing out in the West, in BC and Alberta now for about 2 or 3 years. And it's one that works really well. It's more social and gives you the opportunity to really do a lot more networking. We've listened, and over the next 2 days, we'll be in this room together for all presentations. Your CE credits will still be tracked via the barcode on your badge. So when the speaker is done, you'll just need to go out, exit, and get your badge scanned. Take a break, stretch your legs, visit with our sponsor booths. And I assure you that we have plenty of room monitors on all 3 of these doors, so there's no need to line up at the doors before the speaker is finished. We'll get you in and out quickly. Just a reminder that if you have cell phones with you, to just turn them off or set them to vibrate. And sponsor support is critical to making these events happen, so please take time during the breaks to enjoy a cup of coffee and visit with those sponsors. On that note, I'd like to thank our sponsors. Our overall sponsor is IG Wealth Management, elite sponsors Empire Life and FP Canada, premium sponsors Humania and Special Risk Managers, select sponsors Assurus, Bridgehouse Asset Managers, Canada Life, CWB Maxium Financial, Desjardins Financial Security Independent Network, Orange Benefit Fund, and our media sponsors, Advisors Edge and Investment Executive. Now let's get to it. Our first speaker of the day is Preet Banerjee, who recently started a firm called Money Gaps, Inc. Originally trained as a neuroscientist, followed by a brief foray as an aspiring race car driver, Preet Banerjee landed in the world of finance, now a consultant to the wealth management industry with a focus on the commercial application of behavioral finance research and fintech. He hosted a TV show on the Oprah Winfrey Network, was a financial panelist on CBC's The National with Peter Mansbridge for 7 years, and is a regular contributor to the morning show on Global Television. He's also a columnist with the Globe and Mail, board member of the Foundation for the Advancement of Investor Rights Canada, the governor of the University of Toronto, founder of Money Gaps, a hybrid advisor financial technology startup, and is currently pursuing a doctorate at Henley in the UK. So if you didn't feel inadequate before, I'm sure you do now. So that is a very impressive resume. Please welcome Preet Banerjee.
Well, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I also want to thank IFB for bringing me out to speak to you today. It's my absolute privilege and honor to do so. And I'm going to be talking to you about wooden shoes in France circa 1790. No, really I am. And one of the reasons I'm going to start talking about this is that there's this fear of technophobia and how technology is going to impact people's way of life and disrupt employment And we're seeing this in the financial services as well. And I want to tell you that these fears are not new. These fears have been around for a long time. So let me set the stage. If we go back to the late 1700s, if you're a high-skilled, high-paid worker, you worked in a textile mill. And it took years of training to be able to work in these textile mills, and you made good money. And you tended to live in the big cities, you wore nice clothes, and you had nice leather shoes. And around the 1790s, these textile mill owners started to bring in automation and machines to displace these workers. They were called stocking frames, and you could use low-skilled labor to produce clothes using these stocking frames. And so the high-paid, high-skilled workers, they didn't like this at all, so they went on strike. And so what the mill owners said is, all right, well, if you're going to go on strike, we're going to bring in some scab workers. And we brought these scab workers in from the rural countryside. And in the countryside, if you lived there, you didn't make a lot of money, you didn't have the fancy clothes, and you didn't have leather shoes. You wore wooden shoes. So, the Dutch call them clogs. Well, in France, they're called sabots. And so the slang name for these scab workers became sabot. These sabots came in to take our jobs. And so after a while, the high-skilled, high-paid laborers who went on strike said, you know what? We're not making any money, and these people are taking our jobs. Why don't we go back to work, and we'll just work like a sabot. We'll work very slow. We won't be very productive, but we'll work like a sabot, and at least we'll get paid. But by working really slowly, we will voice our protest. And this is where we get the word sabotage from. This fear of technology has been around for hundreds of years and is never going to go away. Let's fast forward from the late 1700s to the early 1900s. Let me show you just how these fears have been allayed over time. 1920s, March of the machine makes for idle hands. Fast forward to the 1940s, does machine displace man in the long run? 1960s, automation might end most unskilled jobs in 10 years. So by 1970, all unskilled labor was supposed to have disappeared. That never happened. 1980s, a robot is after your job. Fast forward to the 2000s, we had the run up due to the tech bubble. We know how that ended. Fast forward to today, 2019, and maybe finally some reprieve. Here's a report that says the World Bank says robots aren't killing jobs yet. Finally, some good news. Just kidding. Here's the rest of the headline. Don't listen to it, right? So the fear about automation impacting employment and people's ways of life have been around forever, and that is never going to change. If we look at the financial services, the first automated teller machine was introduced 52 years ago by Barclays Bank in the UK. And at the time, bank tellers were up in arms. And they were saying, this is insane. You're going to take away all our jobs. This is going to be horrible for society. There are more bank tellers today than there ever has been. So how does this make sense? It's very simple. They embraced technology. The technology was used for menial tasks like processing withdrawals and deposits. And what that did is it freed up the ability of humans to provide higher value-added services, right? So we automate away the menial tasks and we focus humans for the more important tasks. That's the theme of how we embrace technology. Where do we see this today? The flavor of the day, the impact of technology and the technophobia that we have. You've seen all the ads. You know exactly which ads I'm talking about that encourage people to just fire their advisor, and if you do that, you'll retire wealthier, right? It's as simple as that. And here is the thesis, right? And basically what they say, and this is taken from an actual ad, they basically say, fire advisor, use our service, save 1.33% in annual costs, and you'll retire 30% wealthier. It's as simple as that. Well, apropos of nothing, I want to share with you a quote by Nobel laureate Ronald Coase, who once famously said during a lecture, if you torture the data long enough, it will confess. So let's take a more balanced look at the data, shall we? And for the last 5 years, I went back to school. I'm pursuing a doctorate, and my research question is looking at quantifying the value of financial advice across different delivery channels, specifically in Canada. So I've got a lot to say about the true value of advice. Let's take a giant step back and really take a look at the 30,000-foot perspective. academic researchers use standardized questions to measure the financial literacy level of people all around the world. And I'm going to share with you these 3 questions, and then I'm going to share with you Canadians' results. All right, so here are the 3 questions. Question number 1. Suppose you had $100 in a savings account and the interest rate was 2% per year. After 5 years, how much do you think you would have in the account if you left the money to grow? You're not even required to calculate it. It's multiple choice. More than $102, exactly $102, less than $102, don't know. So I think you can see that these are not particularly difficult questions. Here's question number 2, and by the way, I'm not giving you the answers because if you don't know, you shouldn't be in the room. Question number 2, imagine that the interest rate on your savings account was 1% per year and inflation was 2% per year. After 1 year, how much would you be able to buy with the money in this account? More than today, exactly the same, less than today, don't know. And here's question number 3 in our trilogy of brain teasers. Is the following statement true or false? We've devolved from multiple choice to true false. Buying a single company stock usually provides a safer return than a stock mutual fund, which is diversified. True, false, don't know. So, here are the results for Canadians. I'm glad you're all sitting down. 57.54% of Canadians could not answer all 3 questions correctly. It gets worse. If you're under 35, 70.27% of you could not answer all 3 questions correctly. So we have to take a giant step back and ask a few questions. How many people are truly financially illiterate enough to actually manage their own finances? It is a remarkably small number, but the percentage of people who talk about it, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? They get a disproportional amount of the attention. But I'm going to guess that, if you can answer those 3 questions, I don't have the confidence that you can then go out and manage your own finances. Those 3 questions were ridiculous, right? So if you use a higher standard, maybe 10% of people are financially literate enough that they could process some trades, make a few clicks. But then of those 10%, how many people could then manage their own insurance portfolio, their own estate planning, their own tax planning? I'm going to say it's probably somewhere in the single-digit percentage range of people who could truly well do it themselves. And good for them. But for the vast majority of people, 90% of people are going to need some form of advice. And we can never lose sight of the big picture, even though the small part of the crowd gets all the attention. So one of the problems exacerbating this is that there is no consensus on the value of financial advice. There's a couple of reasons for this. If we take a look at the media's perspective, it has been very much cost-centric. Right, so let me share with you some sample headlines here. From Bloomberg, your financial advisor may be charging way too much. From CNN Money, are you paying too much for financial advice? And the Globe and Mail is very blunt. Should I dump my investment advisor to save on fees? Right, so media has been very cost-centric in general. If we take a look at the academic world, they have a slightly different lens as well. They're very portfolio-centric. So here are some selected papers that have been published talking about the value of financial advisors. What is the impact of financial advisors on retirement portfolio choices and outcomes? From the Journal of Finance, the granddaddy of academic finance journals, how does household portfolio diversification vary with financial literacy and financial advice? The Journal of Financial Management, financial advice and individual investor portfolio performance. So you can see the academic world has been very portfolio-centric when measuring the value of advice. And we know that that value proposition has changed. If we take a look at the value proposition over time, it's constantly evolving and the evolution will not stop. So if you go back 50 years, financial advice was all about the buying and selling of individual securities. That's all it was. And then May 1st, 1975, that changed everything. This is what's known as May Day in the industry. This is when the SEC deregulated commissions. So ironically, up until May 1st, 1975, in the most capitalistic country in the world, no matter which stock brokerage you went to, no matter how many shares you were trading, the commission schedule was fixed. Didn't matter who you were or who you went to, everyone paid the same commission schedule. There was no bargaining, no negotiating whatsoever. It wasn't until May 1st, 1975, when the SEC deregulated commissions. And you know what the big fear was back then? This is going to be the end of financial advice.